Hi, everybody. So, today we're going to be talking about starting a business. There's always really one of two questions that we'll have to answer. Do we start our business from scratch or do we buy an existing one? So, let's have a look at some of the issues involved in both of those options. Well, as I said before, probably the most crucial decision any business owner would make is whether they buy a business which already exists or whether they start their own one from scratch. We're going to have a look at both of these options and we'll talk about what might be the advantages and disadvantages of each one. We'll also mention about franchise agreements and we'll see how they work as well. So, once we've decided what we're going to buy or if we're going to make our business from scratch or start or buy one that already exists, we need to think about the legal ownership structure. There are a number that we could choose from. We could be a sole trader, a partnership, or we could actually incorporate the business and form a company. We would finally have to work out an appropriate business model, and that would also involve us setting out a plan, which is going to look at how the business will operate and ultimately create a profit. So, for starting a new business, it's probably a pretty good option if you're doing something that no one has done before. So, a completely new concept that no one else is doing is probably a good idea to establish a new business from scratch. The main advantages of starting from scratch: absolute control and autonomy over the business concept and the way the business works. So, the owner is able to put their own stamp on the business. The price of the business doesn't include the added cost of goodwill, which is what we have to pay for if we're buying some existing business. We've obviously got the freedom to implement our own ideas. We can avoid buying the mistakes that others have made. We obviously have complete control over the decisions in the business, and all the original ideas and concepts are us. And it's probably going to be lower in terms of overall costs because the intangible assets don't need to be purchased. And intangible assets are those things that you can't actually physically touch, but would be existing in a business that you've purchased. There are some disadvantages of starting a business from scratch, one of which is there's a greater degree of uncertainty and risk. You don't have any previous sales history or figures to refer to. It's normally going to involve a lot more work at the start as well because you'll need to hire new staff and develop new procedures, etc. Generally takes longer to establish a customer base and therefore regular cash flow. You'll have to put a lot of time and energy into establishing a good name and reputation, and sometimes it's going to be a little bit harder to actually get finance because you haven't actually started the business before. We'll also need to make sure that we could find a suitable location for the business. This is going to take time and potentially it's going to cost us money as well. We might find that without realising it, we get some unexpected competition. There's also the chance for us to make more mistakes because quite simply we're making a lot of decisions in a very quick amount of time, and it might take a while before significant profits arrive simply because it takes a while to establish the business itself. Some of the other extra considerations we'd need to think about when we're starting a business is obviously locating a suitable premises, registering our business name, and all the relevant licensing and codes of practice requirements. So if we're starting a particular business, we must make sure that we meet all our legal requirements. We need to establish relationships with suppliers and hopefully they'll be reliable and of good quality. We'll need to employ staff and we need to register our intellectual property, and that's things like our names, our way of doing business, etc. If we purchase an existing business, then one of the things we're going to have to do, obviously, if we're purchasing a business that already exists, we're going to end up buying the whole premises, the plant, all the equipment. We'll get an inventory of all the unsold stock purchased at valuation price, which is another way of saying stock at valuation. We'll get the customer accounts, all the contractual and legal rights such as patents. We get their employees and we get the goodwill. And the goodwill is the brand, the actual reputation of the business. We get that, and we have to pay for that as well. Now, the advantages of buying an existing business include a number of things. Firstly, it's much simpler because it's already been registered. The business name is up and legally been registered. Staffing has already been done for us. We can check the business's financial records, so we could take them to the bank and show them that it's been making money. The total cost is agreed upon initially, so we're less likely to see it blow out. In theory, the business is operational, so it should generate cash flow very quickly. Practices and procedures should already be in place, and we don't have to develop them from scratch. We already have existing suppliers, staff, and clients, and the policies and systems are up and running. So if, for example, we picked a cafe and we bought one that already existed, their operating procedures might include things like turning on certain coffee machines, etc., at half an hour before we open, putting certain chairs, tables, etc., out on the footpath, making sure there's certain things in the oven. So all of these practices are already in place, and we can simply follow them. But if we do buy an existing business, one of the things we'll have to do is pay for the intangible assets. And this is the thing that I was talking about before, such as the goodwill. Now, goodwill is best explained as being the reputation of the business. And we don't know exactly how much that should be. It's difficult to value, but obviously some businesses have a very good reputation, so their goodwill is quite expensive. If the business doesn't have a good reputation, then the goodwill one would expect would be a lot lower. It is difficult to value it precisely, and you might end up paying more for the goodwill of that business. There is also the danger that you might end up buying a lemon, in other words, a business that just doesn't work in that place. And obviously, if the reputation of the business is poor, then the goodwill, in fact, won't be worth very much at all. So some questions we should ask if we're buying a business is the obvious one: why is it for sale? If it's a failing business, then that's a bit of a concern for us, because if somebody else couldn't make it work, then why might we be able to? A good reason for buying a business would be if the owner was retiring, because that means that they would have run the business, but they've got to an age where they want to leave. If the owner was going overseas or anything like that, that's actually not a bad business. Or if the owner is in poor health, that would be another good reason to purchase the business. So we want to know why that business is actually for sale. If the vendor is selling the business because they're not making money, then that's actually telling us something about that business itself. Now, we can actually have an expert do an assessment for us and find out if the goodwill is fairly priced. We might, for example, spend a couple of weeks watching that particular business and seeing how many customers enter their doors, how much they're likely to spend, and just spend a bit of time observing how that business is operating. We could investigate future industry trends in the existing market share of the business. So, for example, a newsagent would be an interesting business to purchase, but there's a bit of a concern about newsagents in the future, given the fact that newspapers tend to be going online, and newspapers as a business newsagents as a business don't seem to have that, domination of the market that they used to have a few years ago. We'd also need to think about our suppliers. Are they reliable? Are they good quality? We need to check that as well. And we also need to make sure that if we're buying a cafe, for example, the chairs, the tables, the equipment, is it all in working order? Have we got those items valued properly, or are we paying too much for things that don't work? And obviously we'd need an accountant, and they can check all the financial records over the last few years to make sure that business is actually profitable. We also want to check the premises, literally walk through and have a look at the premises, all the legal contracts that the business is subject to. For example, they might have a legal contract with a particular supplier. We want to make sure, if we didn't want that supplier, can we get out of that contract? We also need to get a lawyer to investigate the legal status of the business. Is anyone going to be taking us to court if we buy this business? Is the council thinking of changing the local laws regarding zoning? These are the sort of things we'd want to check. And also, for the person we're buying from, What's to stop them opening a competing business not far from us? And as a result, suddenly we're competing with the person who is running that business themselves. Let's have a look at a couple of examples of businesses that are for sale. So this is a good example of a business advertisement for a fish and chip shop. It's for sale in a suburb called Endeavour Hills. And that's all we get at the moment. If we wanted more information about that, we'd need to check the cafe, the business broker's website, and we'd find out more information about exactly how much that business is valued at and whether we think it would be a good business for us to purchase. This is an interesting one. This is a glass fencing business for sale. You might not have thought there was actually a business in setting up glass fences, but some of you might be aware that if you've got a backyard pool, the local council has made it mandatory that it needs to be properly fenced. So this particular business will actually go around and install glass fencing for people with pools. And what's great about it is, from an architectural viewpoint, if you look at this fence, you can still see the pool. It doesn't break your line of vision. So the homeowners like that, but it's also quite safe and secure because kids can't actually jump over and get into the pool. So that particular business is for sale as well. This is a business that is for sale in Melbourne. It's a cafe, and it's a really interesting one. It's a really lovely looking cafe. It's very well set out. It's got really nice dark timber furniture, which gives it a very classy look. A lot of nice architectural features to the business itself. Very well spaced out. The bar of the business is very well organised. You've got the coffee section to the left, and you've got food offerings on the right. Very visible, clear, windowed counters there, so it makes it easy for people to make their choice. It says the cafe takes $18,000 a week, which is very impressive. If it takes in $18,000 a week, then it obviously means that they've got quite a few customers coming through purchasing both food and drinks in this cafe. So we'd need to think about that one. The asking price is $468,000 for that particular business. So just like any kind of business or house for sale, for example, you might speak to the agent, see if you could offer them a little bit less, see if they'd be willing to take it, and you'd have to value how much that cafe is worth based upon how much you think you could improve it and how much it takes each week. It would be a very interesting exercise to do. All right, okay, let's have a look at some activities we can do. So I'll speak to you in just a minute. Thanks, guys.